Welcome you all to today's OCDA Candidates Forum. Woo! It took us about three to 4 months of working to get us here. So I want to just look at this amazing flyer by Oswaldo of all the candidates. This page here is around interpretation on Zoom. So if you are on Zoom and you need Spanish interpretation, there is a little globe on the right-hand bottom of your screen, and that's where you'll access Spanish interpretation. I've said that multiple times in Spanish. The organizations that are hosting this event are nonprofits that do not endorse or oppose any candidates for elected public office. We believe in interpretation justice. And so by offering language interpretation, we are committing to language justice, the human right to express ourselves in the language of communication mode that is most comfortable and one that we feel most free to participate fully, understand, learn, dialogue, question, propose, transform, build, and dream. All of us are responsible for creating an effective language justice space by taking your time to speak clearly and at a moderate pace, especially if reading a written text, enunciating any names, explaining acronyms, and repeating numbers and data. Did you all see how it went really fast and then kind of slow? We need to speak slowly, okay? To the candidates. Great. So this is the planning committee. These are our logos, our cool logos. We have here Accord, Resilience Orange County, the ACLU of Southern California, Santana Building Healthy Communities, the People's Budget OC, and Angels for Justice. Now, you might have already received a little placard with important dates about the election. You should have already gotten that. But if you haven't, here are some important dates. On April 28th, which is just a couple more days, voter information guides are going to be mailed to registered voters. So look out for that. On May 9th is going to be the first time you're going to get your ballot. May 9th, you're going to get your ballot, okay? May 23rd is the last day to register to vote in the primary. You're not registered? Well, that's great. We have a registration table right outside to help get you registered, okay? What other important dates that we have? We have this one's May 28th, so beginning 10 days before the election and continuing daily up to election day, voter centers are open to the public. Have y'all heard about a voter center? Yes? Woo! Okay, this is going to be our, I believe, second election. No, this is going to be our third election because we had a recall election. So our third election that where we're going to be using voter centers. Okay, I'll explain a little bit about what voter centers are. And June 7th is the election day. Okay, voter centers will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Okay, if you're in line by 8 p.m., they will take your ballot and you will be able to vote. There are 3 ways to vote in Orange County. 3 ways. We're trying to, well, not me, but we should be making it very easy and accessible for people to vote. One of the ways that you can vote is by dropping off your ballot at a drop box. So these are those big boxes and you'll see them. I called the OC Registrar Voters Office. They have not yet solidified where they're going to be placing these voter boxes, but that should be released by May 9th when you get your ballot. The other way that you can vote is by dropping off at a voting center. There's going to be a pop-up center where there will be people that are working for the registrar's office that will take your ballot there. And the last way that you can vote is by mail. Okay. Rapid fire questions. This is my favorite part of the forum because they come quick, right? And so if you are a rapid fire question is any question that can be asked in a yes or no format. for, or against. These are the little cards. If y'all want one, Jennifer will be walking around and you can ask your question. You might have some questions for the candidates. We're gonna take your question in a yes or no format, okay? What are some examples? Well, do you like pineapple on your pizza? Hawaiian pizza, maybe. Do you like ketchup on your pizza? Okay, that's another one. Okay, no, that's not it. Are you in favor of including apple juice in school lunch? Okay, so you see how we phrase those questions? That's how you should be phrasing your questions, okay? And so if you need one of these questions, Jennifer and I will be walking around. You can turn these questions into myself or Jennifer as well, okay? And now it's time to introduce our moderator for the night, Ellie, Executive Director of Accord.
Oh, you're pretty tall. You had it like up here. Sorry. All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My job is easy today. I just have to make sure nobody fights and make sure everybody is very polite. But no, I appreciate you all being here today. Again, my name is Eli Flores, Executive Director at Orange County Communities Organized for Responsible Development. And our mission is to bring workers, families, community partners together to organize and advocate for a good jobs, strong neighborhoods, and an inclusive democracy in Orange County. And so I will be moderating today. And so as this forum, as you saw the organizations that were mentioned here today, but this forum is part of our collective ongoing voter education effort to help voters make informed decisions at the upcoming primary election on June 7th. And as you saw, please vote ahead of time. You don't have to wait until June 7th to actually vote before. And of course, in this program, we hope that you can learn more about each of the candidates and what they hope to do if elected as the next district attorney for Orange County. And so also I want to make a plug-in for a table that is out back. If you either are here or maybe you're online listening and you are not yet a US citizen, but you are a resident, you may be eligible already to apply for citizenship. So to fulfill your American dream, right, of becoming a US citizen and being actually eligible to vote for elections. So please visit our table in the back, or you could also visit us online at accord.org for more information on how to become a US citizen. So all candidates for the Orange County District Attorney election were invited to participate in this forum, and 3 of the 4 accepted the invitation and are present. And I would like to introduce you to them now. So let's give them a round of applause for being here today and being here to speak to the community. So first, I want to introduce candidate Brian Chiak. Give him a next, I want to introduce candidate Pete Harding. And I would like to also introduce to you candidate Michael Jacobs. So we are holding a chair for incumbent candidate Todd Spitzer in the case that he arrives for the forum. We reached out to their campaign, but unfortunately, they mentioned they would be unavailable for this forum. So now I'm gonna begin with providing some instructions. I'll begin with in Spanish. So hay una mesa en la parte de atrás dedicada a la interpretación de este foro de candidatos. Si desea escuchar este foro en español, visite la mesa en la parte posterior para obtener un dispositivo de interpretación. I won't say that in English because you don't need to know. But so I'll begin with some procedures so we all are under the same understanding of the rules for today and also for the audience as well. So first, I want to begin by explaining the procedures for this forum, and we'll start with the procedures for the candidates. So each candidate will receive 3 minutes for an opening statement. and 2 minutes for closing remarks. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to answer each of the questions for the portions of the Q&A. If the name of another candidate is mentioned in a response, the candidate who was mentioned will be given 1 minute to respond or rebuttal to the statement. Timekeepers will be sitting in the front row, and if you want to raise your hand, timekeepers. Awesome. So the candidates know who the timekeepers are, and they will be holding up cards when you have 30 seconds left, 15 seconds left, and it will hold a stop card when your time is up. If you continue to speak after your time is up, I will politely say thank you and move on. So I don't want to be mean today. So, just try to keep it concise. And no personal attacks or references will be allowed. Those will be out of order. Now, for the audience, I want to mention a few things for you to keep in mind for today. This forum is being broadcast live on Zoom, Facebook Live, and on Radio Santana 104.7 FM. We ask that you refrain from any cursing at this, as this is being heard and viewed by a large audience. Please, everyone, I did hear a phone right now, so if that was your phone, please put it on silent or vibrate. We're asking everybody to do the same thing. We also are asking folks to that you please respect and treat every candidate fairly and respectfully. We are here to hear directly from the candidates themselves. Individuals who disrupt today will be asked to leave. We have asked that all campaign staff and volunteers limit their canvassing activities to outside of the venue. You will most likely see a table out there if you so want to pick up materials from the candidates and any literature that they may have. So you may do so at any point or on your way out of this event. We have a panel of community leaders that are going to ask the questions today. And actually, let's give them a round of applause who are going to be helping us today with the questions. And once again, you are encouraged to submit your questions through the rapid fire cards. You saw them come around. Please submit them as a yes or no formatted question. Also, if you are watching online via Zoom, you can submit your questions also via Zoom. We will have a portion of this program where we will be reading these questions so that candidates will have a chance to provide their answers. Awesome. So we will go ahead and now get started with candidate opening statements. So I will have to go alphabetical order by last name for the opening statements and then do reverse on the back end. But like I am a middle child, unfortunately, Ms. P. Harding, you will always be second for those portions. Yeah, it's the curse of the middle child. Sorry. All right, so I want to first give an opportunity to candidate Mr. Brian Chiak. Mr. Brian Chiak, you have 3 minutes for your opening statement, and those 3 minutes, if you want to grab the mic, sure. All right, so Mr. Chiak, your 3 minutes begin now.
Hello, my name is Brian Chiak, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I particularly want to thank Pete and Mike for also being here. And I would like to thank Pete personally for his service to this country. A little bit about myself. I was born in Southern California. I moved from Big Bear to Orange County when I was 4 years old. I went to public elementary, middle, and high school in San Clemente and graduated from the University of California at San Diego. With respect to the District Attorney's Office, I believe it should be apolitical and committed to ensuring the fair, equal, and transparent administration of justice. Unfortunately, we have had the past 2 office holders be rocked by scandals. The current district attorney has used racist and derogatory language in public and behind closed doors, is facing multiple lawsuits that may cost the county millions of dollars, and continues to engage in behavior that only further alienates members of this community. For quite frankly, I entered this race because I believe Orange County deserves better. We need somebody unconnected to the issues of the past and present, and somebody who can provide independent and unbiased leadership while restoring public confidence in the office and the justice system as a whole. I am so committed to the independence of the District Attorney's Office that I am foregoing campaign contributions from any source. With respect to the county and this country, recent events have clearly demonstrated that public confidence is diminished when any segment of the justice system comes into question. Now, I fully realize I cannot make decisions that everyone will agree with all the time. However, my administration will be dedicated to making fair, equal, and transparent decisions and would strive to make sure that members of the community understood even when they disagreed with decisions from the office. As for my qualifications, I graduated law school in the top 10% of my class, clerked for 2 United States Court of Appeals judges, was in private practice in Los Angeles, and have been with the U.S. Justice Department since 2006. While at DOJ, I received 2 Assistant Attorney General Awards for Excellence and 2 for Distinguished Service. In 2015, I received the Attorney General Award, one of the highest awards the department issues, for my work in a criminal terrorism prosecution out of Portland, Oregon. In 2016, I transferred to the Southern District of California to serve as counsel for the Drug Enforcement Administration. As counsel, I work with approximately 350 special agents, task force officers, and others to prosecute drug cartel members, street-level fentanyl dealers, gang members, and doctors and pharmacies that divert controlled substances. I look forward to answering your questions and hopefully earning your vote. Thank you.
And we're just going to ask for the interpreter's sake that if you could either bring it really the mic closer, or you can in fact pick up the mic if you can. I know it might be harder through the questions once we get started, but if you could speak a little bit louder, just we want to make sure that the interpreter can hear you clearly and can interpret for the folks online and the folks here. Thank you so much. So now I want to give the opportunity for opening statements for Mr. Pete Harding. Mr. Pete Harding, your 3 minutes begin now.
Thank you. If there's one thing I want everyone to know about me, it's that I've always answered the call to serve. My father was an Army veteran who later became a judge. My mother served in the intelligence field in Washington, D.C., was a school teacher, and raised me and my 3 siblings. They instilled in me the values that guided them. First and foremost, integrity, servant leadership, courage, respect, and compassion for our fellow community members, whether as a Marine Corps officer in garrison or at war in Afghanistan, or as a military, federal, or local prosecutor right here in Orange County, serving and protecting our communities with those values at heart have always been what has driven me. Now, with crime and homelessness surging in Orange County above and beyond the levels we see across the state, and our current district attorney drowning in a sea of scandals and endless lawsuits that cost us taxpayers millions of dollars, I feel called to serve again. If I'm fortunate enough to earn your support and be elected, here's what you can expect from me. First and foremost, I'll restore professionalism and integrity to the district attorney's office by providing leadership, not showmanship, to the dedicated public servants who staff that office, and to you, the people of Orange County. I'll work to solve the underlying drivers of crime. Look, prosecutors see people recycled through the system time and again for a variety of crimes, but the same underlying set of factors: addiction, mental illness, and homelessness. Until we recognize those as the public health crises that they are and treat them as such, instead of simply hitting people over the head with punishment time and time again, expecting a different result, we will continue this ever-revolving criminal justice cycle that increases crime and homelessness. Finally, I'll prioritize support for victims and survivors of crime. Folks, we cannot expect victims and survivors of crime to navigate the Byzantine system of services at the most vulnerable and difficult time in their lives. I'll ensure that victims are contacted by victim services within 24 hours of receiving notification. I'll ensure that they're assigned a dedicated support person to help them throughout the process, whether or not the case is prosecuted and whether or not they choose to participate in that. I want to thank the organizers, my fellow candidates, and you all for your interest. Thank you for having me.
All right, and now I will go over to Mr. Michael Jacobs for your opening statement. Mr. Jacobs, your 3 minutes begin now.
I want to thank the Planning Commissioner, the Commission for having me here, the committee, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And what I want to do in these 3 minutes is kind of tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the issues I see in the District Attorney's Office. My qualifications and background a little bit different than the other 3 candidates. During the course of my career, I spent close to 30 years in the District Attorney's Office. Within those 30 years, I spent 21 years in vertical trial units. Vertical trial units are special trial units. The ones I was in every single one except for juvenile gangs. After my tour on the felony panel, I worked in career criminal, then I worked in sexual assault, I worked in narcotics special assignment, and I worked 13 years in homicide. I supervised the felony panel for 1.5 years, and I worked in homicide for 13 years, and I supervised homicide for 3 years. During my tour on the panel, when I supervised the panel, every case that went through trial went through me. It had to be approved by me. During the, some people might say, well, do qualifications matter? Does it matter whether you can do the work? And I think I happen to be the only candidate who spent time in the office like that, and the only candidate who worked in vertical trial units, and the only candidate who supervised vertical trial units. So why am I saying this? I know how to do the work. I know how to do the work. I've done it. Question might come up is, how about someone running the DA's office who has minimal experience? What effect does that have? What has happened? Well, I know Todd Spitzer. I've known him for a long time. It happened to be that I supervised him for 1 year and 3 months when he was on the felony panel. He did 9 trials. He did 9 trials and then he left the office. So what has the effect of that been? What has that experiment turned out? Well, as the other candidates have pointed out, I think you could term it almost chaos. You've had serious cases that have been compromised. You have 16 lawsuits that have been filed. And what's interesting about those lawsuits, 2 of them are wrongful terminations of investigators who are working on cases. One of the 16 lawsuits or claims that are going to become lawsuits, 15 of them were filed by women. So there seems to be a management problem there having to do with gender that needs to be worked out. Another 2 problems or 2 cases, well, 15 seconds, I better go fast. Case at, there's the Robichaux case. The Robichaux case is something that you may have read about. Dr. Robichaux and his girlfriend there were 7 victims, and 7 victims in that case.
Thank you,
was
Mr.
totally,
Jacobs. If you want to give a final thought, last
Can I
thought.
finish that thought? There were 7 victims on an excellent case that he totally destructed and destroyed for no reason at all. And probably the worst misconduct I've ever seen by a district attorney. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and I'll ask once again, if you could just make sure that you can speak a little loudly or bring the mic closer to you, please. And we're just having a little bit of trouble hearing in the back, the interpreter. So just please speak a little loudly or bring the mic closer to you. So thank you all. So now we will begin to move into our question and answer portion. And we're gonna have our community members each come up and ask a question. Each portion for each question will last about 8 minutes long. These questions would be on the topic of immigration, mental health, youth justice, and LGBTQ. So first, I want to invite Laura Hernandez to the mic so she can ask the first question on immigration.
Hello, thank you for being here tonight. My name is Laura, and I'm the coordinator for the OC Rapid Response Network. Using a participatory defense model, we work to empower families and community members who are navigating the immigration and criminal justice system. These issues are very important to the families we serve and to the communities you are tasked with serving. Orange County's criminal legal system unjustly and disproportionately harms Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and Asian and Pacific Islander communities. In recent years, the legislature and California voters have demonstrated a strong commitment to reforming our criminal justice system and ending mass incarceration. California's jails and prisons voluntarily and unnecessarily transfer immigrant and refugee community members eligible for release from state or local custody to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. These voluntary transfers subject community members to double punishment and further trauma. OC has transferred the most amount of people to ICE in all of California since 2019, making us the deportation capital of the state. What specific actions will you take to instruct prosecutors to consider immigration-related consequences at all stages of a case? And how will you use your discretion to reach immigration-safe dispositions for non-citizens?
All right, so we will begin this immigration question. And again, each candidate will have 1 minute and a half to respond. So we'll begin with Mr. Chiak. Your 1 minute and a half, if you want to grab the mic, your 1 minute and a half response begins now.
Immigration is an incredibly complex issue. I mean, it is a myriad of patchwork of federal and state laws, executive orders, and federal policy initiatives. It would be very, very difficult for district attorneys to be experts in immigration law as well as the prosecution aspect. So I'm not sure there is a mechanism by which one could actually inform a criminal defendant of all potential immigration-related effects of pleading guilty or going to trial. The difficulty is also there's no guarantee that anything told to the defendant on day one would be in existence 5, 10, 15 years from now. This country used to actually have some compromise that existed politically, where you would have comprehensive immigration reform and you could give legal status to the estimated 11 million people in this country. That process has just fallen apart. It is difficult to rely on the district attorney's office to fix a broken immigration system, but I would do everything in my power to ensure that the administration of justice was fair and transparent. I would do whatever I could to ensure that individual defendants made knowing and voluntary pleas, and I would make sure that there was an understanding that any immigration-related consequence might be the result of pleading guilty to a crime.
Same question. We'll go ahead and go with Mr. Harding. Your response to this question, your 1 minute and a half begins now.
One of the top priorities of my campaign has been, and my administration will be, building bridges with our immigrant communities, which are integral to the safety and productivity of our county as a whole. Look, our current district attorney talks tough about following the law, but he hasn't even acknowledged the state of the law in this area. That California law, according to the Supreme Court, requires prosecutors to take into consideration immigration consequences. And our district attorney is not talking about that or training his prosecutors to do that. Wherever possible, we must pursue charges that won't trigger immigration consequences, so as not to punish people twice, once in the criminal justice system and again in the immigration system. It's important to understand this isn't just the right thing to do morally, it's a public safety imperative. It's important that our immigrant communities feel safe so that they feel safe reporting crime, participating in investigations, and testifying at trial. If they don't feel safe doing that, then we are all less safe.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. We'll go ahead and go to Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, your 1 minute and a half begins now.
Okay. Thank you. I researched this and did some looking into this last night, because this has been an issue that came up particularly during President Trump's campaign in 2016 and after he was elected. And the problem is that the California, the Truth Act, I'm sorry, the Trust Act, the Truth Act, and the Values Act all conflict with 8 U.S. code. And there's 3 code sections that they conflict with. It's 18 U.S. 1357 C and G, 8 U.S. Code 1373, and 8 U.S. Code 1647. And the problem is, all of these, the rules, and especially in the California Values Act, lay out specific things that local prosecutors are not supposed to do. The problem is those go conflict in the federal against the federal laws. And so, of course, if I remember thinking, well, if Trump was smart, he could criminalize these statutes and make it really difficult for people to enact or follow through on these sanctuary laws, but he didn't do that. So the problem you have now is you have California law that conflicts with federal law, and the problem is there's no enforcement rules. There's no way to enforce either one. So what you have is in Orange County, you have them going a roundabout trying to avoid these things by entering in agreements with local agencies. And it's no one's happy about it. And so I think what I'm trying to say is there is no easy solution.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. All right, we are going to move on to the portion of the question on mental health. And for that, we want to welcome Ms. Tina Jackson to the mic.
I am a Marine Corps veteran, and I have a son with mental health issues that has been caught up in the Orange County courts. And so this is very important to me because I see a lot of failure, especially in Orange County, on failure for the veterans and a failure with children and adolescents with mental health issues. Okay, in this environment, mental health issues are more relevant than ever. However, the courts, just like in society at large, people suffering from mental health issues are often pushed aside without proper treatment. For example, many military veterans suffer from untreated PTSD. As such, they are self-medicating themselves with alcohol and drugs, which sometimes leads to conflict and arrest. Suicidal veterans often do not call for help because we often end up as victims of deadly police encounters that leave us either dead or injured. Additionally, mental health diversion is underutilized and inaccessible to people who need it, including people that are on gang injunctions. What are your plans to ensure Orange County increases access to diversion programs and necessary resources like community-based mental health treatment as a means to create more alternatives to incarceration? And will you commit to increasing access to Veterans Court?
All right, for this portion, we will begin with Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, your 1.5 minute response to this question begins now.
Okay, well, one of the big problems here is that I've gathered is the failure of the federal Veterans Administration to take care of our veterans. And there's been, each administration comes along and says they're going to fix it, and they're not fixing it, and they're not getting the care that they need. Therefore, I think the problem is it's become a local issue as well. I think the only way that a prosecutor can get involved is to recognize, and I've seen this myself from the years that I've been in practice. I've seen cases where you have to customize the case to fit the person and their medical problems, because the mental issues are what's causing the criminal acts. And you just need to be able to recognize that, identify it. But right now, you only can do that on a case-by-case basis using the facilities that are available. And admittedly, those are limited, both state and federal.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. We'll go ahead and go to Mr. Harding for your response on the question on the mental health. Your 1.5 minutes begins now.
Yes, I will expand access to Veterans Court and courts to treat people with addiction and mental illnesses. Tina, I want to start by saying Semper Fi to my fellow Marine Corps veteran, and I want to express how sorry I am that your son is suffering with mental illness and in the criminal justice system. It's important that we recognize this as a byproduct of our broken revolving door criminal justice system. We've got to recognize the issues, recognize these issues as the public health crises that they are, and get at the root issues of crime instead of criminalizing them. We've got to expand diversion programs, yes, but we also have to ensure that they reflect the most modern medical information and data and social science that tells us very clearly that addiction is not linear. There are going to be bumps in the road, and we can't have a zero tolerance policy for people to stay in these programs. We also need to support crisis response teams staffed with people who are specially trained to recognize and deal with people who are struggling with addiction issues, homelessness, or mental illness, so that uniformed police officers can do what they do best, community policing and apprehending and arresting violent criminals. Thank you.
And now to Mr. Chiak, your 1.5-minute response begins now.
Yes, I would also agree to increase access to Veterans Court. And I would also like to thank you for your service. And I do feel very sorry for your son. That is an all too common problem. We're not only experiencing here in Orange County, but across the United States. It's important to understand that government, and particularly the law enforcement side, is basically a sledgehammer, right? It is not the organization that you want to go to fix sort of mental health and related issues. We can do everything we can, but at the end of the day, very well-intentioned programs have disastrous consequences. So for example, methamphetamine used to be made with the active ingredient in Sudafed, right? The federal government and the government of Mexico, for that matter, did an excellent job of restricting access to ephedrine. What happened was people started making meth in a different manner. They use cyanide, lye, and other toxic ingredients to make methamphetamine. I am not a scientist, but if you use this type of meth even a few times, it dramatically changes your brain chemistry. And so we have to understand that drug addiction, particularly to drugs like methamphetamine, heroin, fentanyl, is the source of most people's problems. They are not criminals first and then drug addicts. They are drug addicts and then criminals. If we can address that underlying cause, we should do much better as a society.
Thank you, Mr. Chiak. I want to make a minor addition. I mentioned 4 topics when I first started. I just want to mention the additional topics that will be discussed, and there'll be questions on that. So in addition to the ones I named, there will be a question on houselessness, systemic racism, and police accountability. So there'll be questions on those topics as well. So now I'm going to move on to the question on youth justice. And for that, I want to welcome Brianna Neva to the mic.
Hello, my name is Brianna Nava, and today I'm going to talk about youth justice. Children in Orange County are transferred to adult courts at more than twice the statewide rate. 60 decades of research have found no evidence of any deterrent effect of transferring minors into the criminal adult legal system. And in fact, youth who are tried as adults are most likely to be charged with a future crime than youth adjacent in the juvenile system. Orange County Adult Court is a promising pilot program serving 18 to 25-year-olds charged with an eligible felony. The court is one of 5 such programs in the country, and the only one that has a research component attached to it through the University of California, Irvine. The young adult court enables young people to have their felony charge reduced to a misdemeanor or have their charge completely dismissed. Are you open to expanding Orange County's young adult court to have more youth, including those accused of violent crimes? Why or why not? Thank you.
All right. My apologies. I said Neva. It's Nava. I should have known. I'm Latino, right? All right. Well, I want to go ahead and begin with Mr. Harding for this question. Mr. Harding, your 1.5 minute response begins now.
Yes, I will absolutely commit to doubling down on those types of programs, which are proven to reduce recidivism and lead to positive life outcomes. But I want to go beyond that. Modern science tells us what we parents have always known, that the human brain cognitively doesn't stop developing until about the age of 25. Kids can do some dumb things. no doubt about it. With all due respect to my 9-year-old, who I know is watching at home, they can do some silly things that can get them in trouble. But we parents also know the kids have a remarkable ability to adapt and learn and grow. And we need to support those rather than criminalize their behavior. Look, we pay a terrible price for criminalizing youth in our society. When kids are locked up with older, hardened offenders, it should surprise none of us that they're abused and they learn from them. And when they get out, they lash out. And studies tell us very clearly that kids who are locked up with adults have significantly higher recidivism rates than their peers who go through the juvenile justice system. I am committed to ending the prosecution of children as adults.
Thank you. I'm going to go over to Mr. Chiak for your response to this question. Your 1.5 minutes begins now.
Yes, I would also commit to expanding access to juvenile courts in programs like that. I actually believe that Prop 57 strikes the right balance. It is important that prosecutors have a check on the power to charge a juvenile in adult court. And I believe requiring a judge to approve that charge is the appropriate framework. Look, at absolutely 100%, the presumption is that a juvenile should not be tried in adult court. However, there are instances in which juveniles have committed heinous crimes. For example, I was just reading about an example in New Orleans where a group of teenagers, including a 17-year-old male, carjacked a 73-year-old woman. Her arm got caught in the seatbelt. She was dragged to death. Her arm fell off and she bled to death. There are certain crimes that have to be addressed differently than the vast majority of criminal offenses committed by juveniles. While I would absolutely commit to the presumption and even the standard being juveniles tried in alternative courts, I could not wholeheartedly agree that that would never occur in adult court.
Thank you, Mr. Chiak. I'll go ahead and give Mr. Jacobs. You have 1.5 minutes and your 1.5 minutes begins now.
Well, I have to say, I totally disagree with Mr. Harden about refusing to prosecute juveniles under any circumstance. I think that's, my problem is I've been there. I've been out there in the trenches. I've seen what 15 and 16-year-olds will do. And when you have a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old who shoots 2 people at a party and kills them for no reason, they need to be incarcerated for more than past their age of 25. So I think Proposition 57 goes far enough. I don't think we need to go any further. And if you've seen what I've seen and the crimes that juveniles can commit, you'd probably agree with me. And I just remember, it reminds me of my favorite statement about crime. Crime is an abstract until it enters your own living room. And we should think about that before we start making rules like the one that Mr. Harden wants us to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Harding, you were mentioned in that response. I will go ahead and give you 1 minute to respond, and your 1 minute response starts now.
Thank you. I want to make clear that I do not believe in blanket policies. In extreme cases, and they are very rare, but they are extreme cases, we may look at prosecuting a juvenile as an adult. I agree with Mr. Chiak on that, but as a general matter, as a presumption, we should not be charging juveniles as adults, and I want to make that very clear.
Thank you. Now we'll move over to the topic on LGBTQ, and for that, I want to invite to the mic Bethany Webb.
I'm going to take this off. So I am both the mother of a trans child and a resident of Huntington Beach. And if you are aware of what happened a year ago in Huntington Beach, 2 transgender women were arrested, and after they were attacked and charged with crimes. So not only were they not protected by the police, but they ended up in court. Now the charges, once they got to court, were dropped after lawyers' fees were paid and everything, but the policing was so incredibly bad. What are you going to do about that? I mean, we need to know that our LGBTQ community is safe, not only from people that will target them in the street, but from the police who target them. So I want to know specifically what you will do for rogue police officers who are not protecting and serving, but are part of the problem.
I will go to Mr. Chiak for the first response to this question, and your 1 minute and a half begins now.
Thank you for the question. I recognize this is an area in which we are failing miserably. I mean, I'm probably older than most people in this room. I mean, I remember the case of Matthew Shepard, and I had thought we were a long way from that. I mean, thanks to basically Justice Kennedy, the Supreme Court had moved in a direction that I thought this was really not an issue for the vast majority of society anymore. But we're seeing legislation like whatever they're referring to as "Don't Say Gay" bills and other pieces of legislation that is victimizing our LGBTQ community again and again. It is relatively trite, but I believe the only way that we can actually fix this problem is through education. We must do better as a police force, as a law enforcement community, as a justice system, to recognize that vulnerable populations, no matter where they exist, deserve the protection of law enforcement and the justice system. Now, the only way we're going to be able to do that is to educate and educate and educate. And I understand there are always going to be people that think differently, and there will always be problems. But we have to address this issue head on and not just use words to describe the problems that continue to exist in this society. And I will dedicate myself to ensuring that LGBT and any vulnerable person is protected not only by the DA's office, but by the law enforcement agencies in this county.
I will go over to Mr. Jacobs for your response to this question. Your 1 minute and a half begins now.
I think the main issue we're talking about really isn't necessarily LGBT. It's really police accountability. And that's been a real problem in Orange County for I think the last 20 years or more. And I know myself from working in the district attorney's office and hearing about the present administration, that there's one deputy that's responsible for keeping all cases where officers are suspects. And this one deputy is responsible for looking at them and deciding if they should be filed or not. More often than not, they don't get filed. I remember running a search and seeing how very few cases are filed against the police for anything, whether it's for booking evidence, for brutality. There are virtually no filings at all, really. And one of the problems, I think, is from the last election, I think the Sheriff's Association spent over $400,000 trying to help Mr. Rokakis's campaign. And even though he lost, I'm sure Mr. Spitzer is counting on the same financing to come his way too. And it makes it a little difficult, I guess, for them to file cases on situations like this, and it shouldn't. It needs to be more independent, and we need more filings, and we need to be more fair. And I think it's not just about one particular segment of our population, it's about all of us. And it's a problem that really needs to be rectified by the next administration. Thank you.
Mr. Harding, your time to respond to this question begins now.
Our current district attorney has consistently, throughout his 30-year career as a politician, attacked the rights of the LGBTQ+ community. As a legislator, he voted against legalizing same-sex marriage, and over the course of his career, the highest grade he's ever earned from Equality California is 20%. We've got a lot of work to do to build bridges with our LGBTQ+ communities, with leaders in that community across Orange County. It's not enough just to brag about prosecuting hate crime. Hate crime against that community is unsurprisingly growing out of control. How can that community feel safe meeting with Mr. Spitzer and trusting him to do the right thing when he's worked against them his whole career? We've got to build bridges with that community, and we've got to work with community stakeholders across Orange County to address the underlying fundamental societal issues that are leading to this kind of hate in the first place. This is not visited equally upon all our communities. We can do a lot better here in Orange County. And again, similar to immigration, it's not just the right thing to do, it's a public safety strategy. The LGBTQ plus community is essential to our community. We need them to feel safe, to report crime to law enforcement, participate in investigations, and testify at trial. That makes all of us safer.
Thank you all so much for that first portion of the questions. We're going to take a quick pause. I want to give a special thank you to our timekeepers. I didn't acknowledge you at the beginning. Thank you, timekeepers. We're probably going to be like try to do this like 200 times, and there's a special place for you all in Orange County heaven. So we want to make sure that this is the last opportunity for you to go ahead and ask or write your rapid questions. If you need one of these cards, please ask for one now. As you heard the candidates express their views, their positions on certain questions, this is a great time for you to ask some follow-up yes or no questions. So please go ahead and ask for a card. Make sure that you give it back to our staff who are collecting them, and so they can go ahead and make sure that your question can be asked during the time. So we'll take about a minute or two to go ahead and pass those around. Get started again. And all right, timekeepers, we're good. Awesome. Y'all need some water? No, you're good. You got your water? All right. All right, well, thank you all so much. And thank you all who have submitted your questions here and also online. We want to thank everyone who has submitted, and online, please continue to submit your questions via Zoom. We want to go ahead and make sure that your presence is felt during this forum as well. So we want to, again, special request from our interpreters today. Please speak into the mic. Please be as loud as you can. We want to make sure that what you are saying will be interpreted in Spanish for all of our Spanish-dominant voters that are here and that are listening online as well and on the radio. Thank you. All right, so we will go ahead and move to our next series of questions, and these topics are going to include houselessness, systemic racism, and police accountability. Those will be the next questions that are going to be asked. And to go ahead and help us with the question on houselessness, I want to bring up to the microphone Brooke Weissman.
Thank you all for being here. So as hopefully you all know, the only evidence-based, fiscally responsible, humane solution to being unhoused is housing. We can't possibly incarcerate our way out of the housing crisis, but healthcare and housing are the only answer. Our community has repeatedly failed on housing and invested money into the wrong pockets. If you're elected, we'd like to know how you're going to ensure that we don't take more money that should be used on housing and other solutions and invest them in the wrong pockets. And while you do that, what steps you'll take to stop the cycle of people who are unhoused being arrested for non-victim crimes like trespass on the railroad or possession of a shopping cart, cycling through the court jail room, pleading guilty for time served, and racking up a series of convictions that then prevent them from accessing housing in the end. So what steps will you take to, before they come into custody, before that warrant is issued, to help end the cycle that our community is going through?
All right, I will go to Mr. Harding for first response to this question. Mr. Harding, your time begins now.
Sure. Well, the first thing that's worth noting is that our current district attorney, Todd Spitzer, has been a no-show at the Orange County Commission on Homelessness. He's regularly spoken out against the creation of shelters. It's no surprise, therefore, that in the last 3 years, homelessness has skyrocketed over 40% in Orange County. As I've spoken about, we need to treat this as a public health crisis and not simply try and criminalize our way out of it. Look, the top 10 most prosecuted crimes in Orange County at a time when violent crime is rising are all low-level, nonviolent offenses. That creates a cycle of poverty, crime, and homelessness by making it harder and harder for someone to find their next job or find a place to live. We've got to end that. We've got to, under my administration, we will either decline to charge or seek diversion for first-time nonviolent low-level offenses to give people another shot to get back on the right track. I'll also advocate before the Board of Supervisors and the state legislature to open up funding for the type of addiction and mental health treatment that people need to get back on their feet, and affordable housing and shelters. Our streets cannot be the waiting room for permanent housing. We've got to have leaders who will stand up and advocate for shelters and affordable housing in this community.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Chiak for your response to this question. Your time begins now.
Thank you for the question. I would agree that we really need to do more for our houselessness community. As I sort of mentioned earlier, the real problem here for the vast majority of people that are in this transition state is drug use, right? The prevalence of drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine among our homeless population is off the charts, right? We need to do better in treating drug addiction as a mental health and a public health issue. We cannot simply prosecute our way out of cleaning up the streets, right? There has to be vehicles by which we take care of our most vulnerable populations. That includes people that have mental health issues. There are obviously individuals that are, for lack of a better term, temporarily homeless. They've lost their job, they've lost sort of income, they're transitional. Those people can access public services and get the help they need. Somebody who is addicted to methamphetamine is not capable of making their own decisions in a way that would be productive to society. We have to help them get the help that they need. And it doesn't matter if it's their first offense or their 10th offense. If somebody is committing a non-violent crime because they are addicted to methamphetamine and literally unable to control their actions, the criminal justice system is not the right place for them, right? We need to do something different and sort of change the dynamic of how we treat the mental health.
Thank you. Mr. Jacobs, your minute and a half for this question begins now.
Thank you. You know, I think really the problem with homelessness isn't one-dimensional or one problem. And the problem I've seen in the past is various cities and plans in California outside, they try to use one prescription to fit everybody, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Governor Newsom, I believe, just signed a bill where it includes actually forcing people into custody if it's determined that they need mental health. I see some real, I see some real legal problems with enforcing that, and I really question how benefit it would be. I think the problem that we really need to do, it's a big picture, and you need to step back and actually think about social engineering. Our middle class in California is shrinking because of the rules and regulations. It's making difficult for people to work. More people are going out of work and becoming homeless because of the state of our economy. So this really will require a real overall change in our legislation and looking at homelessness as, and not an isolated problem. I think it's a symptom of California. We have the highest poverty level, more people under the poverty level than any other state in the nation. And that's got to be contributing to homelessness. So it's not a small problem. It's a large problem that needs to be addressed by the state legislature. The district attorney's office is limited to its funding and what it can do. It really is, because we need a lot more than just diversion programs. That's only works for certain people, but not for others. So I'm really afraid I don't really have an answer, but no one has so far. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will go ahead and move on to our next question, our next topic. This topic is going to be on systemic racism. And this topic, the question will be asked by Justice Crudup.
Hi, everybody. My name is Justice. I represent the OC Justice Initiative. We're a political nonprofit, BIPOC youth empowered nonprofit in Orange County with the goal of not only ending racial injustice in Orange County, but also educating our BIPOC youth on how to speak truth to power by demonstrating in our communities and also providing educational opportunities to eventually put our BIPOC youth in positions of power to legislate. The first ever, I want to say that the first ever youth empowered BIPOC organization in Orange County. So I'm very proud to say that. With that said, gentlemen, in Orange County, Black people are overrepresented among individuals charged with a crime. Black residents represent just over 2% of the county's total population, yet make up nearly 6% of the people charged by the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Black residents are more likely to be criminally charged and face jail or prison time for low-level offenses than members of any other racial group. And they are persistent in racial disparities in access to diversion programs in Orange County. Orange County communities are ready for the DA's office to ensure that BIPOC communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color are safe, heard, and afforded equal rights. Let me say that again. The Orange County community is ready for the new DA to ensure that BIPOC communities are safe, heard, and afforded equal rights. So with that said, what specific actions will you take with your prosecutors and with your policies to eliminate and erase racial disparities in the entire Orange County criminal legal system? Please name specific instructions and specific policies you will enforce with your prosecutors to eliminate racial disparities, again, within the entire Orange County legal system. Thank you.
We will begin this question with Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, your 1 minute and a half response begins now.
I think what we're talking about here, it's not necessarily a statute or a rule or a regulation. I think what we're really talking about is an attitude, and an attitude, a bad example of which was set by Mr. Spitzer a few months ago when he made a comment about some racial comments about when reviewing a penalty on a capital case. And the problem is, I think that it has to do with more with personalities and making the file decisions. In the DA's office, just like in this county and just like every other county, there's a wide range of discretion in filing. And the only thing that I could say that could root out this problem of racism, at least in the DA's office, is to root out the attitude of racial attitudes that are often revealed by the comments like the one Mr. Spitzer made in regarding to the case, which is really inexcusable and unforgivable, but it also exhibits a certain mindset that needs to be eliminated, or we will not have the fairness that we're talking about. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and move to Mr. Chiak for your response. Your 1 minute and a half begins now.
Unfortunately, this problem is not limited to Orange County. If you go back through, even recent history, you have distinctions on the federal level between crack cocaine and cocaine. You have terminology like super predators. I mean, these are problems that exist in the entire criminal justice system, not the Orange County, or not limited to the Orange County District Attorney's Office or the Orange County Police Force. There are certain legislation that is attempting to address that problem that has done a relatively decent job. Prop 47 has seen a reduction in the differences between African-American and white defendants, and that's a good place to start. But we need to do a systematic review of all legislation to see what statutes make sense from a criminal enforcement standard and what are just perpetuating racial stereotypes, right? There was no reason to distinguish between crack and regular cocaine. And yet for years, that was a significant reason why African-Americans were incarcerated for a longer period of time than white defendants for almost the exact same drug. I would take it upon myself to empower prosecutors to make individual charging and sentencing decisions to make sure that we were not perpetuating racial stereotypes or racial disparities simply for the sake of making an argument that we're making Orange County safer. Thank you.
Mr. Harding, your 1 minute and a half begins now.
Thank you. I pledge to reduce racial disparities in Orange County's criminal justice system by increasing the number of and access to diversion programs, assigning staff to examine cases for resentencing pursuant to AB 1540 and 2942. We've got to institute blind charging. We'll decline prosecution or seek diversion for first-time, low-level, nonviolent offenses, ensuring that no one charged with a crime is locked up pre-trial because of his or her inability to pay. In other words, we will base bail solely on community safety. Ending the prosecution of children as adults is another way we can root out systemic racism. Look, we know that people of color are vastly overrepresented in the criminal justice system. Just how much they are in Orange County is unclear because Todd Spitzer runs his office as a black box into which we feed millions of taxpayer dollars and get no information in return. I pledge here and now to make the most open and transparent district attorney's office in Orange County history by tracking statistics and allocation of resources and making them readily publicly available to you all so that you can hold leaders accountable.
Thank you. Our final topic in question on police accountability, we want to bring up Teresa Smith.
Hello, I think, can you guys hear me? Anyway, this is really hard for families to talk about. Anyway, from 2010 to 2020, the OCDA's office reviewed 142 shootings by law enforcement agencies here in Orange County. According to OCDA's reports, the office declined to charge officers in all 142 of their shootings. I have fought for police accountability for 13 years since my son Cesar Cruz was murdered by Anaheim Police Department, and the former OCDA justified the shooting. Year after year, we see the OCDA's office justify police murders, and we will hold the elected OCDA accountable. What will you do to ensure that the district attorney's office accurately applies the changed law? Because there is a law now, and they do not rely on the previous legal standard in deciding whether to charge police officers who killed. Because we, the families, we have so much trauma when they do this to us because there isn't any accountability.
For our final question, I will go to Mr. Harding for your response first. Mr. Harding, your 1 minute and a half begins now.
One of our problems is that our current district attorney is bought and paid for by police unions, and he has been throughout his 30-year term as a career politician. That creates a fundamental conflict of interest and degrades public trust in our criminal justice system. To avoid that, I have committed from the beginning of my campaign to not accepting a dime from law enforcement agencies or unions. As district attorney, I'll create a dedicated unit to review potential police misconduct cases. I won't be afraid to charge law enforcement officers when they break the law. We've got to hold everyone to the same standard. The standard in criminal cases we have in this country is beyond a reasonable doubt. If we can prove a case against a police officer or anyone else beyond a reasonable doubt, we should charge it. But I also believe that the vast majority of police officers are heroes among us and deserve our support. And I will refuse to prosecute police officers just to earn political points. Look, I'm a huge supporter of law enforcement. I've worked with every federal law enforcement agency out there and many of Orange County's law enforcement agencies. But the best way to support law enforcement is not by letting those among them who break the law skate. It's by holding them accountable to enhance trust and in the criminal justice system and in law enforcement, and thereby increase public safety in our community.
Thank you. I will go to Mr. Someone's phone. All right, now it's okay. It's our timekeeper. Just kidding. All right, we will go over to Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, your response to this question on police accountability. Your time begins now.
I think I can say from my career and my own experience, I agree with what was just said. It was for 20 years under the Rackauckus administration and for 3 years under this administration, there's been almost blanket immunity for police misconduct. And it goes all the way back. If you research it, you go back to look at the case of a victim named Chamberlain was killed in 2008, and there was obvious police misconduct there, and it was covered up. It was covered up. And people remember that case because there was clear-cut liability, and there should have been filings on some of the deputies involved, and they did the most unbelievable, complex cover-up I've ever seen. They did a 52-page grand jury report without putting names in it. And I read that and I go, what good is that? What good is this? They didn't want you to know who was involved. And that mindset continues to this day. I have a woman whose son was killed at a party, was shot in the face. She has been unable to get the records from them. Why? I have a feeling I know why, because the shooter's father was an Anaheim police sergeant, and he gave the shooter the gun. And all of a sudden, we can't get the records. We can't find out what happened. Can you believe a district attorney's office hiding from a victim's mother what happened to him, hiding behind a public records exception for investigation? It's been 17 years and she doesn't know what happened. How do you correct that? How do you correct that? You get a new DA and you get a new administration. That's the only way you can correct.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Last but not least, Mr. Chiak, your 1.5 minutes for this question begins now.
Yes, I mean, this is an incredibly difficult question and one that is not limited, again, to Orange County. Police accountability has been a difficult problem to address across the United States. That has almost fundamentally changed with George Floyd and other incidents. You see a more willingness within prosecutors to take on police unions and police officers who engage in misconduct. But however, what we really need in a district attorney's office is an office that is more representative of the community. A community represented office will understand what that community is going through, right? And so when you have people that have shared experiences, there's a better understanding among those people about what actually transpired. You used to have police departments that were adamantly opposed to things like body-worn cameras. Now they are commonplace, right? We are moving in the right direction. It will never be fast enough and it will never be enough for the families of these victims. But I share Mr. Hardin's view. The vast majority of police officers are attempting to do the right thing. We actually strengthen the police force and we strengthen communities when we weed out police officers who are committing misconduct. Thank you.
All right, I want to give our community leaders a round of applause for all of those questions. And I want to go ahead and give a special shout out again to Radio Santana 104.7, who is airing this live. So we want to thank them as well for being part of this process and supporting our community. Now, I will go ahead and move into some rapid fire questions. And so I have some here on line, but also have some on the cards. Top voted, and then the questions you received. Okay, awesome. Oh, quick question. Sidebar. All right, so for this portion of the questions, it's going to be a simple yes or no. We won't have time for you to explain your answer. We just need a yes or no response. For my sake, because I think it's going to be hard for me to switch back and forth, I will start with over on Mr. Chiak, and I'm going to go this way for your yes and no responses. So I won't be able to go back and forth through these. I will begin with the questions from Zoom. And thank you all so much who submitted questions via Zoom. The first question will be, should you be elected, do you intend to establish a conviction integrity unit to review claims of wrongful conviction? We'll begin on that end.
Yes.
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 Second question, historically, both Sheriff Barnes and Todd Spitzer refused to charge any law enforcement for their excessive police brutality, murders, and corruption. Will you represent and prioritize the public over the unjustified protection of law enforcement? We'll begin on that side.
If I understand the question correctly, yes.
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 Next question is, does anyone have any future plans on supporting parental rights and ensuring anyone who violates those rights, God-given to women, be brought to justice to the full extent of the California state law as well as federal law?
Can you repeat that?
I'll repeat the question again. Sorry, I know it was a pretty thick question there. The question again is, does anyone have any future plans on supporting parental rights and ensuring anyone who violates those rights, there's a quote, God-given to women, be brought to justice to the full extent of California state law as well as federal law?
Yes.
I think the question is on parental rights, and there's a specific pointing to rights of women. So anyone who violates those rights, do you commit to bring those folks to justice to the full extent of California law as well as federal law?
As rephrased, yes.
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 I hope I did a good job of rephrasing. I know it was a pretty big question. It happens to me, you write things and then you just, you want to say everything. All right, last Zoom question that I have here is, do you think qualified immunity for law enforcement should continue to be the policy in Orange County? I'll repeat it again. Do you think qualified immunity for law enforcement should continue to be the policy in Orange County? We'll begin with Mr. Chiak.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Thank you. Those are our Zoom questions. Thank you so much to everyone on Zoom for submitting those questions. I will go ahead and read the card questions that were submitted. And again, we are going to be asking the questions that were clearly yes or no questions. And I apologize because I recognize that there is very diverse writing abilities on these cards. So I will try my best to ask it as accurate as possible. Reasonable minds may differ about the morality of the death penalty, but do you agree that our death penalty is so obviously dead and broken, with no exception, over 750 people on death row, that any DA who seeks the death penalty today is pandering / washing money as I read that, I understood that that's a very complicated question. So I think the question is on the death penalty. And do you agree that our death penalty is so obviously dead? So I think the question might be, if I may ask whoever wrote this, but if I may ask, are you for the death penalty? Is that a better way to
I
phrase
think what
this?
they're saying, are you pandering by voting for it? Are you pandering for it?
Right, right. But I recognize that it's
to
a
help you out
very
there.
complicated, I know. So I want to rephrase as, are you for the death penalty, yes or no?
I'm not for the death penalty, but I believe the death penalty is appropriate in certain circumstances.
I should have probably requested it. No?
No.
Okay,
Yes.
yes. Sorry if I didn't do justice to your question. Next question. Are you for the decriminalization of recreational drugs?
I assume that means all drugs?
Recreational drugs, my assumption is if it's recreational,
No.
No, not without further study.
No.
I don't know what drugs you use, but be safe, please. Next question is, will you prosecute killer sheriffs?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Killer sheriff.
All right. There's two questions on here. Let me read this question before I ask it. Okay. First question here is, do you support continuing cash bail?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
And if not, nope, this is a long question. It'll not be a yes or no question. Moving on. Will you dissolve all 13 gang injunctions?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Next question, would you be willing to bring charges against a police officer if circumstances lead to potential charges for brutality?
Yes.
Yes, if it can be proved beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, yeah. You can see that. Yes.
Will you make public the race of every defendant and the charges against them so that the California Racial Justice Act can be implemented?
Yes.
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 Will you help Kurt Reinhold? I hope I said that last name correctly. Reinhold? Reinhold. Okay, thank you. Will you help Kurt Reinhold justice? I'm assuming it's seek justice or get justice, obtain justice? Okay. Will you help Kurt Reinhold seek justice?
I don't know anything about that case.
All right. Let's hold. These are yes or no responses. Thank you.
Look, in fairness, this is not subject to a yes or no question.
Okay.
You know, we should be willing as an office and as a society to go back and look at cases where we may have gotten it wrong, and I will be willing to do that. But we here should not be committing to certain decisions one way or another that would prejudice later on when we may be elected.
So because I allowed for a quick response, I will get Mr. Jacobs, I will allow you for a quick response as well. And I'll go back to Mr. Chiak if you want to add to your
I think
response.
before you can say that, you need to know more about the facts. And it's hard to just say that with what little knowledge that we have. So I don't think I can.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. And Mr. Chiak, you give a quick response. I will let you respond if you want to add something to your original response.
Yeah, again, I don't know enough about the case to opine on whether or not charges would be appropriate.
Thank you. All right. Oh, this nice person starts it with happy day. Recently, Honorable Todd requested from Orange County Board of Supervisors and received permission to send a proxy to the county board meetings. Will you attend the county board meetings? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 And then there was a follow-up of, or send a proxy.
No.
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 Last card question. It's on political corruption. Is political corruption, is that a serious problem in Orange County, which the last two DAs have ignored and you would address seriously?
Yes.
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 All right. Thank you all so much for the questions on the cards. I apologize if I did not read your question correctly. It was a little hard to read. All right, we will go ahead for this portion. We'll start here with Mr. Jacobs for this lightning round of rapid fire questions, and we'll go that way towards Mr. Chiak. First questions on youth justice. First question is, given the studies that indicate that a child's brain is not fully developed until the age of 25 years old, will you commit to keeping all children out of adult court by pledging not to prosecute any minors as adults? I know this was asked before, but we're asking for yes or no responses on this one. So,
No.
Mr. Jacobs.
No.
Yes.
No.
Next question is on systematic racism. Will you pledge to eliminate the use of sentence enhancements, including but not limited to gang enhancements and status enhancements that are major contributors of extreme sentences and racial disparities? Will you pledge to eliminate those enhancements?
No.
Yes.
No.
On criminal justice, we have, actually, I've already asked one of these questions, so we'll go ahead and ask the other two. The first question is, will you commit to expand the Orange County Conviction Integrity Unit? I asked that question as well. I caught myself in the middle. All right, last question on criminal justice for yes or no. AB 2942 and AB 1540 gives district attorneys broad power to seek resentencing for individuals. Will you commit to working with re-entry experts and advocates to develop public criteria and policies for reviewing and reevaluating sentences?
Yes.
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 On police accountability, will you decline to file charges where an arrest provides evidence to the officers engaged in racial profiling and other racial bias?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay,
Sorry.
I'll repeat the question. Will you decline to file charges where an arrest provides evidence that the officer engaged in racial profiling or other racial bias?
Yes.
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 We have questions on immigration. First question is, are you in support of the California Values Act, the California State Sanctuary Law?
No.
Yes.
No.
Do you think California should take stronger measures to prohibit all collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE?
No.
Yes.
No.
Would your office be willing to meet with immigrant rights advocates on a regular basis to hear and address issues of immigration consequences?
Yes.
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 Next portion of question is on decarceration. Will you commit to waiving bail on misdemeanor charges without specific victims?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Will you presumably decline to prosecute misdemeanor offenses? Will you presumptively decline to prosecute misdemeanor offenses such as sex work related offenses and other including sip, sleep, lie, say that 10 times, laws, public urination violation, and other offenses that are often a byproduct of a person experiencing poverty and homelessness?
No.
Yes.
No.
I will move over to houselessness. Do you have a plan for getting pre-filing diversion notices to people without mailing addresses?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that again?
Do
I'm
you
sorry.
have a plan for getting pre-filing diversion notices to people without mailing addresses?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Will you commit to ending the request for failure to appear warrants in no victim misdemeanors where you don't have a valid address to mail notice?
Yes.
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 Will you direct your office to support all fee waiver requests in criminal cases, not reparations, just fees, for individuals who are unhoused or otherwise demonstrate inability to pay?
Yes.
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 And question on tenant rights, will you use California law, in parentheses, and any local ordinance to give the district attorney, that gives the district attorney such authority where applicable, to criminally prosecute landlords and property managers who violate the law and tenant rights?
Yes.
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 All right, I want to thank, let me ask one question on wage theft and workers' rights. Would your office be in favor of creating an internal unit similar to the San Francisco DA, Chesa Boudin, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce his name, office aimed at prosecuting criminal wage theft, stopping labor trafficking, and protecting victims in the workplace?
I'm sorry, could you do that again?
So the question is, would you support, or would your office be in favor of creating a unit similar to the San Francisco DA's office aimed at prosecuting criminal wage theft, stopping labor trafficking, and protecting victims in the workplace?
Yes.
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 All right. Let's give the candidates a round of applause for answering all of those questions. All right, we have we have a couple more questions. Came in via Zoom. All right, I have two more questions that came in via Zoom. I apologize, I just saw it now. The first question, and this is a long question, so bear with me. The Judicial Council of California's 2022 demographic data provided that justices and judges still show low representation for Hispanic and Blacks, not reflecting the population of California. Orange County continues this trend. Meanwhile, Blacks and Hispanics lead in arrests and convictions. Do you believe that the lack of justices and judges impact the statistics of arrested Hispanics and Blacks?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Next question is, will you investigate police officers that are members of white supremacy, members like Proud Boys, 3%ers, and Oath Keepers? Will you investigate police officers that are members of white supremacy groups like Proud Boys, 3%ers, and Oath Keepers?
Yes.
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 All right, thank you all so much for that. Thank you so much for everyone via Zoom. We are nearing the ending of our forum, so I want to thank again all of you for joining us today. We are now going to move into closing remarks from each of our candidates, timekeepers. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their closing remarks. Last time around, we began with Mr. Chiak. Mr. Chiak, you will be last this time. We will go ahead and start with closing remarks from Mr. Michael Jacobs. Mr. Michael Jacobs, your 2 minutes begin now.
Thank you. What I want to do here is cover something I didn't get to cover in my opening, but we touched on it in some of the answers and questions. I want to read to you a quote from Todd Spitzer when he was running for election in 2017. The quote says, "No one can ever understand what someone experiences when a loved one is murdered. It is the ethical duty of prosecutors to ensure there is no delay to justice being served." And what I referenced before, and I want to go over it again, is I want to talk about a woman, Mary Walton. I met Mary Walton in 2009. Her son was killed at a party in 2005. He was shot in the face. It seemed like a very clear-cut second-degree murder until it turned out that the weapon was given to the shooter by his father, who was a sergeant in Anaheim PD. And all of a sudden, Mary couldn't get the report she wanted. She couldn't find out what happened. She had a meeting with deputies in the Orange County DA's office on 2 occasions. They promised her that they would do a reinvestigation, and they promised her that she would get the files and get to see what was done. They reneged. They said it was against the law and they couldn't give her those records or tell her what happened. In June of 2019, I spoke with Mr. Spitzer about this and told her this woman has lost her son and hasn't learned anything about it since 2005. Can you help her? He said he was too busy to be case specific. He refused to meet with her and he refused to turn over the documents. Mary on her own made a records request from the DA's office for the files and the reports. They declined. They declined it based upon an investigation exception. What I'm saying, I worked in homicide for 13 years. I must have handled well over 200 cases. Every case I had, I let the victim have my file. I let the victim have the notebook. It was the least we could do. And that's what's going on. That's the kind of DA Todd Spitzer is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks. Your 2 minutes begin now.
Our current district attorney is a 30-year career politician who's drowning in a sea of scandals and lawsuits that cost us taxpayer dollars millions of dollars. It would take more than my 2 minutes allotted to go through all of the 15 or 16 scandals and lawsuits. But suffice it to say, this is outrageous and enough is enough. We can do better in Orange County. For the sake of justice, equity, and fiscal responsibility, we must end this circus. As a Marine Corps officer, I led the prosecution office for the largest command in the Marine Corps. I trained hundreds of Marines on the rules of engagement heading to Afghanistan, and I led Marines at war in Afghanistan. I've served as a prosecutor at every level of our justice system. I've led trial teams of attorneys, experts, and law enforcement officers. Now I want to leverage that leadership and legal experience to offer a fresh vision for justice in Orange County. Justice with integrity, accountability, and transparency. Justice that works for all of us, not just the few of us. I offer a rethinking of our justice system to prioritize the prosecution of violent crime and support for victims and survivors of crime, while protecting the quality of life that we hold so dear here in Orange County by addressing the underlying issues that detract from it: addiction, mental illness, and homelessness, criminalization of which simply perpetuates the revolving door criminal justice system and cycles of poverty and violence. For more information on my background, folks, and my platform, check out PeteHarden.com. Follow us on social media. We're putting out great content every day, and I want to thank you so much for your interest in the race.
Last but not least, Mr. Brian Chiak, you have 2 minutes for your closing remarks. Your 2 minutes begin now.
Again, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I found it very informative. You will hear essentially the same thing from these candidates and from myself. We all want a smarter justice system and one that is more responsive to the community that it serves. Ultimately, however, the district attorney position is about discretion. And who do you trust? Who do you trust to make the right decision at the right time? Who do you trust to use the tremendous discretion afforded to district attorneys? And who do you trust to keep the community safe while appropriately distinguishing between those people who deserve imprisonment and those people who deserve a different course of action? I believe that my background and experience merits your trust for this position. However, I understand that people will think differently. And my one request of you is to vote. In the primary off presidential elections, we often struggle to get half electoral vote people of electoral college to vote, the electorate to vote. It is too important a job to leave it to half of Orange County to decide who is district attorney. And California makes it incredibly convenient for you to vote. So please, if you have any interest in this campaign, vote. I promise that if I'm elected, I will engage the entire community, not just special interests, to make meaningful change. I will endeavor to have the office be more reflective of the community it represents, and I will always use my position to protect our most vulnerable population. As someone unconnected to the Orange County District Attorney's Office, I can provide independent and unbiased leadership. While I may not make the same decision that everybody else would in this room, no one will ever question my integrity or my commitment to justice. I would be humbled to receive your vote and serve as your next district attorney. Thank you, and please stay safe.
Let's give the candidates a round of applause. We want to thank you for coming tonight. And give yourselves a round of applause for being here. And everyone via Zoom for joining today. You could have been anywhere else. You could have been eating some tacos, but you are here. So thank you all. Thank you to our community leaders as well. Thank you to our timekeepers. I want to make some quick final thoughts. I just want to, again, thank you all so much. Thank you for the candidates for participating in this part of this democratic process and the exchange of ideas. This is what democracy is all about. A democracy is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Voting is now easier than ever, as it was illustrated earlier today. You can vote by mail or in person. We want to remind you, June 7th is the election day. You can vote 10 days before June 7th. And then once again, we will have the general midterm elections in November 8th. So this is a very exciting year. If you need to register to vote, please do not leave today without registering in the tables outside of this room. If you have moved since the last time you voted, you have to actualize your address. You have to go ahead and refill out a voter registration form to ensure that your address is current. So please do that as well before you leave. Also, again, if you are not going to take part in this election or this process, because you are not yet a citizen, but you are a resident of this country, a lawful permanent resident, you have an opportunity to become a U.S. citizen, and we are here to help you as Accord. Please visit us outside, but also online at accord.org. Once again, I want to thank all the candidates. I want to thank the audience, especially thank you to all the organizations, all the staff in the back who have helped us today here as well. Thank you all so much for your tireless work. And thank you all. Please be safe. Hope you all get safe to wherever your destination is. Thank you all so much.